Welcome back to Otaku no Video. As always, thank you very much for joining me, where I'm here to review After War Gundam X. There are actually a couple of different titles for it, but Gundam X. This was the third of the alternate timeline attempts by Sunrise in the mid to late 90s, after G Gundam and Gundam Wing. And X is interesting because it's kind of post-apocalyptic. The concept is very roughly, and it is an alternate timeline, but roughly speaking, what if the one-year war from original Gundam, that huge conflict, what if Amuro had never shown up? And what if that war had dragged on and all that new type research had continued and it had turned into this huge war with just tremendous destruction and just lots of colony drops and just really something absolutely terrible. And in Gundam X, basically that happened. And it's taken 15 years for Earth's biosphere to just begin to recover from the absolute devastation. The colonies are just devastated and essentially not part of the story, practically speaking. So this is set in this sort of ravaged world on Earth. And one of the interesting things about that is, as a result, nobody's producing mobile suits. Nobody's producing Gundams. These are all artifacts from this war 15 years earlier. They may have been recovered and repaired, but that technology takes on a certain, almost a magical flair for common people. I mean, everyone knows they're not magical, but they are these special things from a long time ago. And when a Gundam shows up, that's a big thing for a normal person. So the main character is Garrod Ran, who is a street rat, basically, lived in junkyards all his life. He's 15 years old, stumbles upon a Gundam, as well as a girl about his own age called Tifa. And Tifa is a new type. Now, for those not familiar or haven't seen the other Gundam stuff, a new type is basically someone with special powers that have awakened in that person, especially as that person has lived in space. And the idea is new type powers are powers that are awakening in general in humanity as humanity expands into space colonization. But new type powers can also be used in war. They give you quicker reflexes and certain psychic abilities. So it's clear, without getting into spoilers, and all this stuff is, early first episode stuff. It's clear that Tifa has suffered for her new type powers, which raises some interesting questions about this whole idea of being a new type. Folks have called Gundam X the one Gundam series that really explores the concept of new type powers and what they mean. If you have these special abilities that are awakening people, is it right to research those abilities? Is it right to use those abilities? Is there some humane way of using or researching those abilities without just turning them into weapons of war? And X certainly does explore those themes over the course of the series. So Garrod and Tifa end up falling in with a bunch of basically scavengers in a ship that goes over Earth and around Earth. And the crew of that ship is one of the other things I like about the series. Everyone's pretty functional. No one's insane. In fact, for most of the characters, pretty much all the characters in the series, other than some of the villains, and of course villains are usually pretty wacky, in Gundam and anime in general, everyone's pretty normal and pretty reasonable in Gundam X. There is one main character who's a little bit weird, but there's a very good reason for that. And it doesn't play psychology that, this one thing happened to me, 10 years ago, and that's what, where somebody said a bad word to me, and now I'm an insane psycho. If somebody had something bad happen to them, it was very seriously traumatic. So that's nice. One other nice thing is that Garrod and Tifa have this kind of remarkable relationship. When Garrod sees Tifa, he clearly has a crush on her, and he clearly likes her a lot when he first sees her and kind of starts rescuing her. And they build this relationship over the course of the series that I believed in. I mean, the pilot and his girlfriend, the main pilot and his girlfriend, in any Gundam series is usually one of the elements that receives the least attention of a lot of things. They're just kind of there. And X really delves into that and really sells that relationship. So, how to say this? If they survive together at the end of Gundam X, I would totally believe that they would stay together. You know, completely believable. So these guys travel around, and again, one of the things I like about X is that it has this sort of Saturday morning adventure cartoon vibe to it, which sounds like I'm putting it down, and I'm not. I love those just adventure stories, the Indiana Jones style things, where it's not really meant to be, for lack of better words, realistic. It's meant to be good, fun, episodic adventure, episode to episode. This is helped by the fact that Gundam X has its stories and its storylines done in 3 to 5 episode arcs. So it'll introduce, an antagonist of some kind and deal with that over the course of a few episodes. And won't necessarily kill the antagonist, but will sort of resolve that particular problem for the time being, which really helps this sort of action-adventure story in this post-apocalyptic world. Now, it's not Mad Max. There's plenty of, of groups of people, but there's these small groups. There are no huge cities, and civilization is kind of getting back on its feet at this point. So Gundam X has a much lighter tone than a lot of other Gundam series. And by light, I don't mean sort of the over-the-top ridiculousness of, say, a G Gundam. But it's not trying to be highly complicated with its plot and its story, which, again, I like a lot. Also, solid subcast or Japanese dub cast. This has not been released in America yet, so you're going to have to listen to it with the Japanese dub. And you get some tremendous voice acting in this. Overall, in terms of visual style and budget, this clearly has a higher budget than Gundam Wing. It's not really saying much. And I would say it's middle to middle high budget by Gundam standards. Certainly effective. There are some episodes which have a fair amount of conversational scenes that are cheaper to animate. But I never felt like it was intruding on it. I never felt like they sacrificed story or even action sequences for the budget. It certainly worked perfectly fine. One other thing about that plot, actually, that's impressive. Pretty much every anime series, not just Gundam, every anime series will have a scenario writer or head writer who comes up with the overall story and the plot and so forth, and then episode writers who write the individual episodes. Every episode of Gundam X, including the scenario, was written by one guy. All, I think, 39 episodes of Gundam X, one guy. That's impossible, and you never would have, you never know it. Now, again, the story is not as intricate as some others, but it's not a slouch either. There's a lot going on in Gundam X, a lot of antagonists and things happening. So, kudos to that guy. Wow. Now, I mentioned 39 episodes, and that might raise a flag for some of you who know that Gundam series are typically 50 episodes long. And yes, Gundam X performed so poorly in the ratings, it got canceled halfway through. And to the writer's credit, you wouldn't know. It doesn't, it's not obvious. Now, for people who are used to the way Gundam stories go and how some things are generally explored, some of the plot threads are not explored for as long as you would expect. But what the writer did very, very intelligently, instead of kind of abandoning plot threads, he just resolves them, quickly at the end. Not quickly, but he takes care of a bunch of things all at once, rather than, which is not a euphemism for saying like everyone dies. But all that stuff is wrapped up rather than explored further. And like I said, if you're not a Gundam fan attuned to how things normally progress, you'd never know. So kudos there. And music. Oof. Gundam X has this tremendous, huge score. Big orchestral, lots of doom, lots of Lord of the Rings style music. Maybe not exactly like that, but in the sense of just being big and bold and epic. Perfect. I own the soundtracks. If you want to feel like a truly epic and not just in the overused sense of the term, but a truly epic story, Gundam X has the music for you. So, unfortunately, for those wondering why was it canceled, even though you're talking about how much you love it, the problem is G Gundam came along and was such a different thing for so many Gundam fans that kind of turned away people. Wing came along and had that sort of Bishonen feel to it, and that turned away a lot of the hardcore fans. So by the time X came along, it was kind of in this middle category where it wasn't hardcore, but it was a little more traditional Gundam-like in a sense of how the Gundams were used. There's a bit more military feel to the Gundams and so forth. It just never really found a big audience. So it just sort of sat there in this limbo and unfortunately got low ratings. I think it's a really solid entry into the Gundam franchise. I don't know anyone who says Gundam X is their favorite Gundam series, but I don't know anyone who says it's their worst or least favorite. For me, it was thoroughly entertaining. There was lots of stuff. There are scenes I remember very vividly from Gundam X, and it really explores some of its ethical questions and conundrums, pretty impressively. So, I'm impressed. So Gundam X, as I mentioned, has not been licensed in America, so you'll have to find it somewhere. And if you'd like to talk about Gundam X, please stop by my website, otakunovideo.net, and debate and discuss such things with us. Appreciate it. So that's it for me and Gundam X, and that's about it. Thanks for watching. With bamboo?